Hello, everyone, and welcome. We've got a really exciting topic that we want to unpeel today, and it's on artificial intelligence and using it in enterprise environments. And to do that, I've got a guest that I know you're really going to enjoy speaking with, and that's Francois Candelon. Francois is joining us. He's a senior partner at BCG. He drives the BCG Henderson workaround, the think tank work they do, and he's joining us, as you can see from his background, from Paris. So, Francois, welcome.
So thank you very much. Actually, my background is from Madrid, but I
Ah,
think that's fine. That's not a problem. But thank you, Sanjay. I'm very pleased to be with you today.
yeah, I'm sorry I got that wrong. So you're actually in Paris or you're in Madrid today?
I'm in Paris, but I thought that you might find it as a nice place.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. And that's so interesting. Listen, Francois, the reason I called you on is we've been having a few discussions. And one of the things I came to learn from you is the work you're doing with MIT. And I thought that was really interesting. I know my audience would really enjoy listening to that. I also thought that this whole area that we spend time talking about, and I think is so critical as I work with large enterprises, I see across the board, I see the notion of cross-functional teams and the strategic importance of having cross-functional teams take on AI projects as opposed to just AI teams. And I thought we'd take the time today just to unpeel both of those. And so first things first, let's go to the work you're doing with MIT. Tell us what that's all about.
So basically, what we do with MIT every year, we survey about 3,000 companies to try to see where they're on AI. And I think that there are maybe two comments I would like to make there. The first one is the fact that more and more companies are using AI. 2020, not that much. I would say 2020, the results are similar to 2019. But let's imagine that basically in 2020, 59% of companies say they have an AI strategy, which is 20 percentage points more than 3 years before. But what is even more interesting is that actually just a chunk of them get really significant financial return, around 10% of them. And what these companies have in common is the fact that, of course, they build AI. They have, let's say, all the resources, data, infrastructure, people. But what is really different is the fact that these people are really working on mutual learning between AI and humans. And I was, for instance, discussing the other day with the head of the trading floor, was telling me, okay, yes, we are really doing mutual learning. Basically, the traders, the AI will learn from the traders, for sure, because they look at the data they are here to try to limit noise and so on. Then AI learns on its own and trying to gather millions of decisions made by traders. But then the traders will learn from AI as well, as AI is recommending things, but at the end they decide. And then AI is opening new avenues. And then as soon as you got that, you can start the virtual cycle again.
So wait a minute, let's back up a little bit, because I think you said some really insightful things. I think what I heard was that over the last 3 years, we're seeing more investment in artificial intelligence projects in large enterprises. You're saying that not all of them are turning out to be successful.
Clearly
and then
not.
you're saying of the ones that are successful, you're finding a strong correlation to this idea of mutual learning.
Absolutely.
I got that right? And then I think what you're saying is, and you've expanded my thinking, because I used to always think about reinforcement learning as the human training the AI, right? And we've talked about this in this forum and other forums enough times, so we know what that means. I think what you're bringing out is actually a two-way cycle, that actually the AI is training the humans back to make the humans more effective, more intelligent, more better. And talk to us a little bit about that second part, because I think we all get the first part, but talk to us about the second part. What?
So the second part is the fact that basically, and I will give you one different example. For instance, at DHL, they use AI to do with the pallets, for shipping pallets, to see how stackable they are. And at the beginning, let's say people or workers were looking at this, say, oh yes, but it's weak. Because the worst day for an AI algorithm is day one. So of course it was not great immediately. But then they realized that AI was able to give them some ideas, was saying things that were right, and that even they could look then at these companies, at these palettes in a different way. And then they said, oh yes, but now they even need AI a bit less than what they did originally. And this is this notion of virtuous circle. Another example is we were working at a company, an industrial, a B2B company, on pricing. And basically, by giving AI, the recommendations of AI were new for them. So they said, okay, so it stretched the thinking and of the people, and they were daring to do things that originally they didn't think about, or they were not daring to do. So I think that this combination show that you have between humans and AI, let's say it's dual, it's both ways. And I would say even more and more, because AI is not just for optimization of, let's say, or automation. It can be used in many, many use cases. And this is why even, especially for use cases which are more related to top line, like more personalization or pricing or whatever, this is something that you can do together, and it opens new fronts.
Yeah, what a fascinating insight, because I said we've all talked about the humans training AI and the whole idea of reinforcement learning and so forth. But I think this ability of AI to train humans to be more effective over the long run, goes back to the point about it's augmented intelligence. It's not really artificial intelligence, because the real purpose over here is we're augmenting the human in their intelligence and driving better decisions. That's really, really fascinating. And I suppose, Francois, this is where you draw the link, and you've taken us through a very logical argument, but this is where you draw the link from there to teams and the composition of teams that drive this mutual learning. So talk to us a little bit about that.
No, but I think that the wrong perspective, I would say, in many companies that I have seen, is to say, okay, no, I do AI. Basically, I have an AI team there. Now, it's not the right way to think about it. The right way to think about it is not about AI, it's about a business problem. And the question there is not a business problem where AI might be useful, but this is why you need to have all teams. And I was discussing, for instance, with Anglo-American, where they were saying exactly that. So what we start from a business perspective. And I must admit, I spent the last 7 years in China before being back to Europe. And I think that this is something that Chinese companies do, I would say, probably better than many Western companies. They start from a business problem. They try to solve an issue, and then they look at what is possible to solve this issue. And of course, AI, as we all know, with its ability to have ultra-granular forecasting, automation, let's say real-time decision-making, can really help do that. But think about the business problem that you solve. And this is why you will have marketers, let's say, and other people jointly in one team.
I love that insight. I mean, really, you've actually told us two things, and I resonate with both of them. I loved your example on the work you've done in China and the bit about, I think what you're really saying is AI is not the answer to every question, and that you start with a question and then you come to AI. In other words, you define the problem. And once you define it, you pick the applicable componentry that is going to be best suited to address that. And if that ends up being AI, then you bring AI into play. As opposed to you start with, hey, I've got to do AI. Let's go find a problem that AI can meet. And I think that's the nuance I got from your Chinese experience.
This is a nuance. However, what you need to understand is to understand the power of AI. And therefore, there you don't need to, the question you need to ask yourself is not how should I put AI to improve my process? It's much more how should I redefine my processes to bring AI at the core of my company? And it's not just for digital companies. And I can give you the example of Repsol, the oil and gas Spanish incumbent, so a traditional company in a traditional industry. I will not say in a traditional country, but it's and this company has decided to try to bring AI at the core, and therefore they launched 130, let's say, projects, but really bringing AI at the core. So it was solving issues. So solving issues, and and then they have been able to do that both in, let's say, in their exploration production, reducing the downtime by half, up to creating hundreds of thousands of new offers every day or personalized offers every day in their gas stations. And I think that by doing that, they are putting AI at the cornerstone of the transformation, but it's not they are pushing AI. It's saying, okay, let's transform leveraging all AI capabilities.
Okay, so that's a really interesting nuance, because where I was going earlier was AI is not the answer to every question that you can ask. I think you've nuanced it a little bit. I think what you said is it's important for large corporations to sort of immerse themselves in AI, to be able to understand its capabilities, its limitations, the opportunities it has. And then having done so, think about an end-to-end business process, transform the business process, think about the end-to-end value proposition, and then bring in AI and other components to reimagine that. Is that a better?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I think that one of the key issues we face at different levels is the fact that, and let's be frank, at let's say traditional companies, the top management was not trained in the AI world and was not selected for what AI can do. So I think there is a real question about how to make sure that despite that, they are in a position to take the right decisions. And they need for that to understand the limitations of what AI can do, what it cannot do. And it's a little bit like, let's say, we need to develop the driving license for, let's say, the C-suite on AI. It's a little bit where, okay, you are able to drive a car, even if you don't understand exactly what happens in the engine.
It's fantastic. Look, I think, Francois, you've already shared two really thoughtful insights with us. I mean, this whole bit about mutual learning, this two-way learning cycle is a super important one. And then you talked a little bit about your experience and the takeaway around AI is not the answer to every single question, but it does need to be a thoughtful end-to-end business process transformation, and then AI becomes a component of driving that solution. So it's how you approach the problem is a key to success. I know we're running up to time, but I don't want to let you go. Look, you've got such amazing experience. You consult with some of the greatest companies in the world on this topic. You run a think tank, and you've just told me now that you spent 5 years in China, which arguably is doing a lot of great work in artificial intelligence. And so if I kind of pull all that together, and if you had to leave our audience here with some thoughts, what do you think AI is headed? I mean, what's that conversation we're going to have in 2 years from now?
I think that the conversation we'll have in 2 years from now will be that AI will become vertical. And at least it is what I think at the moment, and maybe you can challenge me and maybe I will be wrong. I don't have a crystal ball. But what I see everywhere is the fact that the basic technology becomes a little bit of a commodity. And vertical by vertical, so industry by industry or use case by use case, you can see that it can, let's say, diverge. I give you one example with computer vision. I was discussing with a very well-known Chinese company on that, and they were telling me that at the moment, they were even thinking about creating different AI teams because they work on autonomous vehicles. And here it's all about colors and speed to be able to take the right decision on time. And on the other front, they work as well for IMR. And here it's about the contrast. And therefore, they need to train different AIs, and it could even have impact on the mother, let's say, innovation. And so I don't know if in a few years from now, maybe not 2, but let's say 5, you won't have companies really specific by vertical.
Wow. Francois, I hadn't planned to go there, but I just want to share 30 seconds of just this, that I so resonate with, and we've talked about this in this forum before, I so resonate with your perspective of this verticalized AI and the notion that, at the horizontal level, it is going to become a commodity. Code is a commodity and algorithms increasingly so. It's the nuancing for a process. It's the industry dynamics associated with how you contextualize that, how you apply that, and you make out of it. And that's where the value is going to be. And so,
yeah, but it has massive implications because people say, or Michael Porter, a famous professor, say that the competitiveness of nation is made of its ability, the ability of its companies, or its ability to innovate and its ability to upgrade its industry. But in AI, what we see is that actually, adoption, upgrading the industry becomes even more important because it can then have, let's say, a retrofit impact on the innovation. And it will play, so if in a country, companies are adopting AI, this country will be much better positioned to then innovate.
And so I think you're leaving us with one final thought, and thank you for that. You're saying just to drive competitive advantage of corporations and countries, sort of get in early. I think that's kind of one of the messages you're leaving us with, because the more you get in, the more you get involved, the more you sort of perfect it, the more you get it right, the more verticalized you make it, the more advantages you'll get out of it.
Absolutely. And to a certain extent, this is why I came back to Europe, because Europe is lagging behind. And I don't want Europe in the 21st century to be, let's say, the China of the 19th century, missing an industrial revolution and leaving history.
Francois, we know we can count upon you on that very important task, and let us know if we can lend any support.
I will try.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have you back in 2 years. We're going to check and see what we said and if that's true. Meanwhile, Francois, I know you've got a busy day. Thank you for joining us. I know our audience often interacts with us on LinkedIn. And so if they do, I just ask you to just keep an eye out. And great perspective, fantastic experience. I'm so thankful for your time here. Thank you and great day.
Thank you, Sanjay.